especially my high performing women, they're the most at risk. In their 20s and 30s, when they're climbing up the ladder, I mean, they could light the world on fire. They could spin a million plates and not drop one. They don't miss a beat and they don't feel it. There's no obvious consequence, but yet there's stuff going on below the surface. Then you hit perimenopause, it's gone on too long, combined with the change in the hormonal milieu. And we start seeing the domino effect. The body can't adapt. These new set points have gone on too long. And depending on somebody's genetic weak link, that's where they're going to feel it. I've never seen a drug capable of such far-reaching thing done right. Does everybody need them? Absolutely not. The game is use them as a bridge. They are not a permanent player for most people unless you're a diabetic or have really the metabolic curve is down. But in menopause, where it's so devastating and you can't move the dial on weight and it's coming on with you doing everything right, the tiniest bit help you normalize the weight.
One thing every burned out woman should stop doing today.
Saying yes when they mean no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Leary. I'm host of the new Vida Vitality Podcast. We're so excited to bring this to you. This is a way for our doctors, guests, people who are experts in their field to then bring real-time information on what they're reading, what they're talking to their patients about, what they're passionate about, and translate that information directly to you.
Welcome everyone to the Vida Vitality Podcast. My name is Dr. Michelle Leary, and I am so excited to introduce today's guest, a friend of mine, a mentor, and a teacher to many. Monique Class is a pioneer in the functional medicine community and a recognized leader and clinician in patient education. She is the co-founder of the Center for Functional Medicine with Dr. Joel Evans, as well as serves as senior faculty for the Institute for Functional Medicine for many, many years, which is where I met her, and is a clinical professor of Yale School of Nursing, as well as serves as the director of curriculum development for the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, where she helps shape the next generation of health coaches and practitioners. Monique has decades of experience integrating functional medicine, women's health, lifestyle medicine, and mind-body medicine. So she's really well-versed in kind of the big picture and how to bring lots of these pieces that we're going to be talking about together. Welcome, Monique. Thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you.
So excited. So just to kind of take a step back, you and I have known each other for going on more than a decade now. And
yes.
It's interesting. I was reflecting before starting today is, I met you initially when I was completing my functional medicine training in 2015. And I just remember your presence. When you step on stage, there are a lot of smart educators at IFM, but your presence was such a calming, very nurturing energy. And I'm not sure if that's because of your nursing background or just your own kind of aura, but I just wanted to start the conversation with that is something that I'm curious, has that always been with you? Is that a learned skill? And if you could just speak to a little bit how you have evolved into achieving such a renowned energy around you.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. That's wonderful to hear that that's your experience of me being in the audience and knowing me all these years. I think some of it is nature, and I'm going to, if we go back to the antecedent, I had a mother who was super calm and loved having children. And there was a lot of play and a lot of fun and a lot of confidence. So I grew up in a home that didn't have any trauma or just, I mean, we have our stuff, but there was no trauma or discord, very unconditionally loving. So I always felt safe, where I know from my clients, and this was like a revelation for me when I started asking clients about ACE scores, and I realized how much trauma there was in people's background that I had never experienced. I didn't know that people had childhoods like that. So number one, I think it is, I've always felt safe. And that lended itself to feeling calm. And number two, I've been meditating since I've been 18. I mean, I've been in this kind of spiritual path early on in the game and never pivoted. So I think it's a combination of my cultivating of my inner practice for many, many decades. And I just had a blessed childhood where I always felt safe and loved. And I think those are the two things. Like, we had joy in our house, and I go to joy fast, and I go to confidence fast and trust fast. So I think when those elements are there and you cultivate your own inner world or inner practice, you know, you get the alchemy of that. Now, I'm not saying that you can't experience inner peace and inner calm and embody that presence if your childhood was rocky. I'm just saying, for me, I think it was one of the ingredients that makes it easier and made my practice easier, because I wasn't upregulated. Most of the time I'm not. I leap to, it's going to be fine and all is well very easily. I don't have to work hard. So it's a blessing. It was a blessed childhood. I didn't even know it.
That's so interesting. I think of a lot of people coming to some of the mind-body medicine work via maybe some trauma work, and it sounds like you came to it from a really kind of stable place that was more of curiosity. So yeah, that's so interesting. Well, today I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about burnout and women and really talking about those who are feeling less safe and feeling maybe like they're in a really rocky place emotionally, mentally, physically, and some of the tools and strategies that you've identified with your patients and even potentially within yourself over the years of how to establish that equilibrium. So you are a nurse by training, and
that's right. That's the background.
That is such a holistic approach right from the get-go. At least I view the nursing profession as a very holistic, and then you pursued obviously additional functional medicine and mind body medicine training. I'm wondering if you could just, before we launch into the burnout conversation, talk about your journey towards nursing and what made you pivot there and how that has shaped your career.
Yeah. So nursing's an interesting profession. So I was an RN before I was ever an advanced practice nurse. I was an RN for 10 or 12 years before I ever went back. And I was a bedside nurse, meaning that was our job, was to be at the bedside, do massages, be with the patient, be the patient advocate, listen to their story. Like, that was our medicine, because we were taking directions. We weren't diagnosing and treating the way doctors were responsible for in hospital settings. Our job was to really follow directives, bump information back up, even though we knew the medicine, and we'd say to the young residents, hey, I think you may want to consider, you teach them lightly this. Our job was really to be with the patient. And so it was about being and not doing. So it was a setup for a different therapeutic encounter right from the get-go. You weren't running in and out. You were the person there. You were their person, right? You were the person in the hospital. You were the person in the doctor's office. That's who you were. That was your training. So the training is different. There was a lot more in nursing school, a lot more nutrition, wellness, stress management, how to be with people, psychology. We had a lot of psychology courses. So you learned a lot about how to be with people in a therapeutic way to establish rapport and help them move forward. So it's similar but different to what coaches are learning now about behavior change, because the essence of nursing, which is Florence Nightingale's model for nursing, is all about the environment you put the patient in changes the expression of health. So she came in during the war, brought nurses in, and realized that if you clean the sheets and you clean the room and you put nice flowers and did these things, they did better just with making the environment, touching them was important. So she looked at those, ingredients of health and healing that weren't quite tangible at the time. It wasn't an antibiotic. It wasn't a surgery. It was just your therapeutic, using what we call in nursing, your therapeutic presence as a healing modality, and being with people in that way, especially in crisis and in trauma. And there's certainly enough of that once you're in nursing long enough. You see all of the trauma and all of the crisis in people's lives. They have a space to unpack it, and you bear
Yeah.
witness to that. So I think it's interesting. I'll say one thing about the ACE scores. When you talk to the person who actually did the ACE scores, founded the ACE scores and he was doing it for Kaiser Permanente, establishing, it was done for an insurance company, figuring out like early childhood events and how you add those up and you can predict complex chronic disease. It was done for Kaiser. And what he said was the antidote, which they didn't publish in all the studies, the antidote was being present with people and letting them express it and holding them in it. That's the antidote. It wasn't a pill. It wasn't a supplement. It wasn't an herb. It was that therapeutic presence where they needed to move through it. They needed to get it out of the body and out of their psyche in some way. That was like major first step, was being present for them. So that's what we're trained to do. It's a different skill set. Now, then fast forward, when I became a nurse practitioner, it's more like a doctor. It's more like a naturopath, where you take that holistic background, but then you're learning medicine in a different way because you're looking at the patient to diagnose and then develop treatment plans. And you're held to the standards in the industry, both to pass board exams and for your license. Like, what do you prescribe for hypertension? Like, you've got to know the metrics and what you're responsible now. And in Connecticut, we don't need, I love working with Dr. Evans, Joel Evans, but we don't need a collaborating doctor. We could have our own practices, right? So and our scope is far reaching. Like we can order all kinds of control substances, bioidentical hormones, testing, things like that. So my background was always more integrated in nature. And then I had the good fortune of going to University of Virginia in the day where they would bring in on main campus, not in the nursing school, but they'd bring in, Ram Dass from Harvard talking about the yogis and what he did. And they'd bring in, John Kabat-Zinn, and they'd bring in Kubler-Ross and all of these cutting edge people onto main campus. And I would just go over there and sit in and realize that there was more to health and healing and consciousness than we knew. And so they'd have shaman. They were really on the cutting edge with who they'd bring in to speak in the main campus. So I had early exposure to Buddhism and different philosophies and shamanism and, what they were doing with psychedelics. Like there were classes on the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics in the day, before they shut it down. So that was around me and washed over me and got me on a spiritual path. I started college early just because I was young, like where my birthday was. So right at first year UVA, I started meditating and going on the spiritual path because of what I was exposed to on the college campus, and then just adopted it. Just kind of, it became a way of being and integrated into my practice.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you had those exposures, first of all, good for you for taking advantage of going to those types of talks and events at such a young age. I think even speaking for myself, going to naturopathic medical school, I think I was so much more focused on the biochemistry oriented learning, and I didn't take advantage of some of the more spiritual and metaphysical opportunities that were presented to me. And now I look back and I'm kind of trying to now take advantage of them, right? 11 years into practice. But you identified that both were important right from early education. And I mean, it doesn't surprise me that then you have presented in your current career as this presence, this person with this aura around you, this energy, which obviously I'm not the only person that feels that way. It's definitely something palpable. So I love that. I love that is how you came to be who you are, and part of why you're such a gift to your patients. So thank you for sharing that. I want to just define a couple things that you said, just because our audience may not be familiar with ACE. So adverse childhood events, as you kind of mentioned, so something that then can contribute to psychological or even physical manifestations of trauma. And we can talk a little bit more about that when we get into this burnout conversation. And then, antecedents, there's a lot of kind of different ways, but things that happened kind of in either our pre-birth era, genetics, how else would you describe antecedents?
Anything that's a setup that predisposes you to whatever your chronic imbalance you're dealing with, or chronic disease, whatever language you want to use, that you're dealing with currently, anything that puts you in the setup compartment for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, yeah. I'm a little bit more global with it than yeah.
Yeah. Than just the strict kind of ISO terminology. Okay. Wonderful. Right. So let's get into this kind of burnout conversation. And I know that you're familiar with the book by Emily Nagoski and her sister, and just kind of the profound way that was described and resonated with so many women. But I want to just ask you, our initial question is, burnout has become this really common term, right? You can kind of talk to anybody and they at least recognize this term burnout. What are you actually seeing in clinical practice, and how do you then kind of trigger in your mind, oh, we're dealing with burnout here? What does that clinical picture look like?
Yeah. And so burnout, which is a great, it's a visual, right? Burnout's different for different people, but I tend to see it in early perimenopause and in perimenopause. Because what happens is the body has an infinite capacity to adapt and create new set points. It's called allostasis, the ability to adapt. So especially in my high performing women, they're the most at risk. So in their 20s and 30s, when they're climbing up the ladder, I mean, they could light the world on fire. They could spin a million plates and not drop one. Don't miss a beat. And they don't feel it. There's no obvious consequence, but yet there's stuff going on below the surface. Then you hit perimenopause, it's gone on too long, combined with the change in the hormonal milieu, and we start seeing the domino effect. The body can't adapt. The set point, these new set points have gone on too long. And depending on somebody's genetic weak link, that's where they're going to feel it. So some people will get extreme anxiety. Some people will freeze. Some people will get depression. Some people, the adrenals are just so fried that they can't get out of bed and it looks like a depression. And so that's layered on top of hormones that are dysregulated in perimenopause to begin with. They're up, down, up, down, up, down. So you've got the perfect storm of your high performers who were able to spin all these plates for so many years. The body starts saying no mas, but they keep going because that's the only way they know how to perform. So if you take a top performer and you tell them to slow down or relax, they're going to reach over and want to wring your neck or never come back and see you because they don't know any better. They've gotten positively reinforced for that behavior their whole life and applauded. And you're going to take away their identity. So it's very interesting to navigate. They don't even want to admit that they have burnout because that's some kind of a failure or a badge of it's a failure. And they put it in the failure bucket. So using different language, like, you've allostatic load, or just that language, like the wear and tear, you've just run it too hard. And so explaining to them that it's a pacing thing. You can still accomplish everything you're doing, but it's the wise use of your time. It's focusing on the things that really mattered and lasering them in and looking at your calendar, people, places, and things that are second tier, let them go. Like they actually have to sit through and say, this is what I really want to accomplish. These are the people, like if someone's calling you and you look at the phone call and you're like, I don't have the energy to talk to this person. I don't want to have to say no when they ask me to do, they should be off your list. Right? You should move those people to the back burner. So you don't have the capacity to take it on. And so you've got to kind of reorganize your life, and then you've got to heal from the inside out, like we know, right? You've got to restore adrenal balance, But, if you're giving people back adrenal reserve and they're spending it at the same time, it's like you go nowhere. So it's figuring out what does that person need to do? Do they need to take, 1 day a month retreat where they leave their house and put their cell phone? Like, what is it? Do they need to take a month at a time, once a year? Like, what do they need to do for the deep work? And how do you begin to restore balance and use a language? I found burnout, they don't like the word because it feels like they'll never get back to what they were, and they're somehow diminished and they're not functioning at full capacity, and maybe they're getting too old. It's none of those things. It's working efficiently. Like, I would tell you at 63, I get more done in a joyful way than I ever did when I was burnt out in my late 40s and early 50s from just hitting that wall. Like, I'm doing all kinds of fun projects because I pick and choose.
Yeah.
And I work at a different pace. And I reorganized my schedule.
Yeah.
Michelle, like, I don't see patients before 10 o'clock and sometimes 11, so that I could do my yoga and my meditation and like, I just reorganized the deck. And I know everybody doesn't have that luxury, but there's always a way you can figure out the realignment slowly. Can't do it overnight usually, but it's like, in a coaching world, we always say, well, what's the first small thing you can do? And that could be every Sunday you turn off your phone, you go in the woods by yourself away from everybody and just no stimuli. So there's always the one small step of doing deep work. And, I would say it's cultivating discernment is the biggest developmental spiritual stage of perimenopause and menopause, is cultivating discernment. Who are the people, places, and things that lift me up? And what are the things I need to move away for or keep on the down low so that I can do the stuff that I really want to do that really bring me joy? Because you don't have the same energetic reserve to put into everything. You'll tumble over and over again and it looks different ways, from irritable bowel syndrome to panic attacks. Like, I've seen people full-blown panic, to GERD, like uncontrollable GERD, to then SIBO and GERD that won't go away, to chronic constipation and bloating from the ongoing stress. It depends on where your genetic weak link is.
Yeah.
So I'll let you, so I said a lot.
No, I really want to dive into kind of how you identify those vulnerabilities, genetics, because I know you do a lot of that. But let's unpack what you just said a little bit. So you described that there is almost this social acceptability for especially higher achievers to just keep pushing until the body says no. And then at that point, often there is this hormonal imbalance that is simultaneously happening. And then if there are, I'm adding this, but if there are aging parents in the mix and young children, or at least, dependent children, teenagers, what have you, there's still a lot of responsibility in the parenting front. And everything is coming in at once, and you don't have that same reserve. That
you don't have the buffer, right?
You don't have the buffer. I want to ask a question about why you think there is this drive to just do more and more and more. Is it just because women want to be successful? Is there a psychological underpinning or pattern that you notice in these women? Is there anything to do with those adverse childhood event individuals that rank higher on ACE scores? What are you noticing pattern-wise, or maybe through your knowledge of the literature?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And you can also jump in and tell me what you're noticing. I'd like to hear from you too. I think it's societal, meaning I think we have so many options available that we can do all these things, that we have found ourselves in the middle of doing everything because we want to. I know I did. I wanted to go back to school and get advanced degrees. I wanted to raise my kids. I wanted to speak all around the world. We have all these wonderful opportunities. And more times than not, it is still our primary responsibility to take care of aging parents and children and do all those things. Like, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, once you get married, it's almost like you fall into these archetypical roles where women do this, and you find yourself picking up the slack for all of it because most, well, not all women, most women are really good at all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it in your 20s. You can even do it in your 30s to some extent. But then it's just too much. And like I said, I think we're applauded for it. Like, even from an HR perspective, like, you want to hire a high performer that's like type A, that like, that's your dream employee because they're going to get stuff done. So it's hard. You're not going to tell them to slow down. It's hard, even though you know it's better for them as the employer. Like, they're making your office or your thing hum. Like, you don't want them to slow down. It's, even though you do, you don't, So I think women are always caught in this dynamic where people either consciously or unconsciously want them to continue the bad trance because they get something out of it, whether it's your husband, your partner, your parents that you're taking care of, your bosses, right? People around you are getting something from it. So conscious or unconscious, they want you to continue because it's disorienting when women pull back. It changes everybody's role, and people don't like that. People around you start to react when you say, I can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? Or when you're not the one, buying the groceries, cooking the dinner, and, running to the post office for them. There's a whole host of reactions. And some women, depending on their ACE scores, this is where they come in, don't want to disappoint people, don't want people being mad. They want to please everybody. So another developmental change as women enter menopause, they go from pleasing everybody to authenticity, where they're like, I can't. I won't and I can't. It's not good for me. So they develop a voice in that way, and they're not driven like they are in the 20s, 30s, and sometimes 40s of pleasing everybody is super important. Like, they want to be liked. They want to please. They want to make people happy. And for some people, and you've probably noticed this, is when it first dawns on them that they can't do it anymore and they've been pleasing everybody, it's almost the boomerang. They come at everybody with anger, right? You got progesterone going down, which makes you go from 0 to 10 in perimenopause. Like, you're crazy anyway because progesterone's offline. And then you're like, all of a sudden realize that you've been doing everything. And instead of reasonable conversations, you scream at everybody. It comes out like a volcano, and everybody thinks you're nuts and wants to blame it on your hormones. And hormones will give you less of a buffer, but that wasn't your driver. Like, you've just done too much for too long. So it's, how do we catch women earlier? I think the question, how do we catch women earlier, have these conversations, make them think about these things? So it's not this volcano, that they're beginning to have healthy, semi-permeable boundaries. Sometimes you need to do a little bit more, but, that they're really looking at these things early so it doesn't reach critical mass where they're yelling at their children for no reason because they're so angry. You're screaming at, I had a couple of, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I'm like, one day I'm going to pick up my kid at school, and this mother was driving like, she's cutting me off. She starts swearing in the middle, gets out of her car, starts like, no one did anything, but she was so like short-tempered that she started screaming at other mothers in the parking lot, like road rage in a parking lot at a middle school, right? Couldn't control her, but I was like, she snapped. She just reached the point where she couldn't tolerate it.
Yeah. It's so
that
great
we don't get to that point.
Yeah, but you were able to see that, and most people would just see like, a crazy, unhinged woman, but you were probably very aware of like, oh, I know what's going on. This woman has just reached her breaking point.
She's hit a wall. She's reached her breaking point, right?
Yeah. And
it's too much.
And like you said, I mean, so many different presentations of that. I mean, there's also the, like you said, can't get out of bed type, where just you shut down and you just are so tired and you just endlessly need to sleep. Others, it's the anxiety kind of presentation, and it's just, it manifests so differently. But I mean, I think the common threads that you've already identified is often anxiety is one of the presenting symptoms. One way or another, depression can creep in, and there is this feeling of hopelessness. It's never going to end. Stuck.
People feel stuck. They feel stuck in it. They don't know how to extricate them. And what the thing is, I think the hopeful message is, you don't have to do it all overnight. You
Yeah.
just have to understand it needs to be done and then get a slow, viable plan to unravel the things that you can't shoulder
Yeah.
right now, right? Just
Yeah.
so,
It's
but
so
yeah,
interesting.
it's really interesting time for women. Like I said, that's the good news. The other thing is, and you can, that like I was this phenotype, the tired and wired, where your adrenals are exhausted, but you're actually wired. So you
Yeah.
override, and at night you have so much cortisol, you're running around chasing your tail. They almost carry it off so long that their crash is worse. The people
Hmm.
who get their adrenals are exhausted and they get exhausted, they can actually, you can actually catch them sooner than your tired and wired phenotype that kind of run adrenaline. Like
Yeah.
those people typically lose weight when they're under stress, they don't gain. The other phenotype, the one that's riding cortisol and gets tired, they typically are the ones gaining weight, right?
Yep.
It's a different, I've noticed that pattern, right? There are
Yeah.
different patterns, but the tired and wired, you they go on for too long, like way too long. They really crash because they
Yeah.
can. Their body allows it. It overcompensates.
What role do you think things like, and I'm dovetailing a little bit here, but in the functional medicine space, we probably do a lot more adrenal testing
Yeah,
than what many other um, disciplines of medicine do, and what role does that play in identifying these women? Or for you, is it a clinical diagnosis, which again, for our listeners, clinical diagnosis means you don't need any testing. You basically listen to the patient's story and say, hey, I think that this is what's going on. Do you
it's a good
rely
question.
on objective data to help you treat and support?
I give people options. So like I can tell by the story and by listening to the
Yeah.
whole thing, knowing if they're tired and wired or tired and by their symptoms and how long the stress has been going on is the biggest clinical clue. Like how
Yeah.
long has all of these things been. So, but people like to see data
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not everybody can afford it.
Yeah.
So I'll say to them, like, I can use a surrogate marker of DHEAS on a
Hmm.
Quest, which would be covered through the payer system. And Quest, believe it or not, has salivary cortisol testing. It's a little bit, you
Hmm.
got to call your Quest and get the codes and all that. But you can do it through the payer system. But I love the adrenal with the car for people that the economics, they have the couple $100 and they can spend. It's nice for them to actually see I'm
See
not
it.
just depressed, I'm flatlining. Like
Yeah.
I'm flatlining. It's not a depression. There are targeted supplements and changes I can make to restore this. Like I think that's helpful when they're feeling so stuck. It's a stuck feeling. They feel
Yeah.
like they're stuck in their lives and they're stuck in this pattern and they don't see a way out. And usually what people do is tell them to do more. Like, well,
Yeah.
you need to learn how to do this. You need to start meditating and you need to go to a yoga class and you need to walk more. All of those things are adding to the burden of
The
burnout
pressure. Hmm.
pressure. Whereas if you just say, what actually do you need to rest? Do you need to get out of
Yeah.
your house? Like just ask them what they actually need and can do. And that's the prescription, whatever it
Yeah.
is, you
Yeah.
know.
So the adrenal testing, there's a couple
Yeah.
different options here. There is specific functional medicine labs
Yeah.
that are doing this, and they have a beautiful report and it's very color coded. And you mentioned cortisol awakening response, which we typically want to see above 50% rise
Yes.
from the time of waking till 30 minutes after.
30
We want
minutes.
to
Yeah.
see cortisol go up by at least 50%. And then we want to see, as you alluded to, this nice slope. So highest in the morning, and then it goes down kind of like a ski slope or a skateboard ramp
Yeah.
throughout the day and being lowest. When you see patterns that are dysregulated, let's just take an example of that person who is kind of high throughout the
Yeah.
whole day, right? They're
Yeah. Yeah.
staying
Yeah.
what are some of, just speaking of interventions that you might talk to your patients
It's
about
a great
that,
question.
yeah, that people can gravitate towards right now or ask their doctor about?
Yeah. So, a couple things on a couple different fronts. So if it's elevated all day long, the wheel of the mind is getting away from them all day long. So I'm always thinking, how can we interrupt the wheel of the mind? Give them a moment. So microdosing the breath is the easiest thing, and attach it to a transition. So, depending on, say if they're a knowledge worker and they're on and off Zoom calls during the day, every time you end one Zoom call, like, notice, your first step is just notice that you are breathing. Notice what you're thinking. Notice that you're breathing, and consciously for 1 minute, deep diaphragmatic breaths. Because if you hold your breath or breathe from neck up, you actually create more anxiety and more cortisol response. Shallow, yeah. And that's what people tend to do. So you put in these little micro things that don't take any time or cost any money, or tether it to, like, get up, notice your breath, go for a walk, drink a glass of water in a slow, mindful way, like, get yourself set. So you just create a new, easy pattern like that. And then, depending on, I love ashwagandha, especially for, perimenopause and menopausal women. The data is so good. It helps the thyroid work better. It normalizes things irregardless of the direction of the imbalance, too high or too low. It's going to normalize cortisol levels. It's a restorative herb. It's just a nice value add. Like I said, it's not the only one I use, but that's a nice one. And I love DHEA. Love it.
Me too.
I think it's so great. Calms down cortisol levels, gives people energy, but not espresso energy. It's like nice, calm energy. It's just a great value add for making people feel good, good for skin, hair, nails, make people feel good, helps restore the adrenal bank account. So I don't over supplement, but I do, depending on the pattern, try to match, and then try to get them feeling a little bit more energy, and then start to make the changes in their life that need to be made, right? And it can be as easy as, like, don't schedule anything on a Saturday that you don't have to do. It can start so simple, like that, like other things.
In my practice, I have a large proportion of patients who still have very young children, like under 10. And often what I hear, and I know you have a lot of these patients and have treated many over the years, is they say, well, I don't have a minute for myself. There's always someone who needs me, and often there's multiple someones that need them. And so with parents of young kids, is the approach different, or is the approach modified in some way? How do you kind of differentiate that?
Well, there's a couple of things you could. These are suggestions, and it's this is based on conversation. Young kids love to meditate and do a couple of yoga postures, so you can bring them in on. We're going to sit and meditate, like, put on the music and bring them in on the moment with you, and that kind of thing. The other thing that we did me and my friends did when our kids were little, because we realized, like, it was getting away from us, is that we'd have one mom would have a play date with all the kids for a couple of hours. Like, every week we rotate. So you had one mom taking all the kids, and they're easier in a bunch, right?
Yes,
like they
are.
Play with each other, right? I'm not talking about 2-year-olds. I'm talking about, like, 8 and 10-year-olds. Like, and then all the other moms would go get their nails done or have, like, so there's ways that you can create community around the fact that we're all exhausted and doing this. And then if they're in school and you're not working, well, then instead of doing every single errand, like, you can reorganize the timing. Like, you do your errands during this time, but this part of the morning, it's you time, right? It's doing your stuff. So it's like looking at the time you have. I think the hardest dynamic is the mom who's working all day long, drops off the kid at school or at daycare, pre-daycare. And, like, I used to do this, I'm sure you do this too. They had to be in a pre-program because you were going to work before school ever started. And then you're working all day, and then you're running up the highway trying to get them before their after school ends. And then you're getting home and you're trying to do dinner, right? It's not a whole lot of wiggle room. And so that has to be, negotiated. And what I started to do when I realized it got away from me was making the bedtime like a real time so that
Mm.
they would be in bed at a certain time or up in there taking their baths and reading. You got to build in some time that they're just not glomming all over you. It's hard, but
Yes,
it
it's hard.
takes a little bit of creativity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a hack that I've shared with some of my patients, although I admittedly am not perfect at this, but I've gotten better over the years, is meditating in the car. If you pull up to daycare
Yes.
before it's the end of the
100%.
day, you are pulling up to that daycare. It's, you have to be there by 5 p.m. and it is 4:50. You
It's
have five
perfect.
minutes to
That's it.
sit in the parking lot and put your phone on some sort of nice music, but it is
So
not a
good.
visual stimulus. And that 5 minutes can
It's a game changer.
be a game changer. And even, during the workday, and this is when my son was under 5, is I used to go into a bathroom stall during the workday, and I just needed to not talk to anyone. Like I needed
Yeah.
not anyone. And that felt restorative. Believe it or not, I mean, it sounds crazy that like a bathroom stall would have that effect, but that was my way of really saying, okay, I need a minute to myself. And I think that we aren't even giving ourselves that often in the
This is
daytime.
so good. What you're saying is
Yeah.
so good because I'm thinking back when I was on site all the time and I had young kids. I used to close my office door like,
Yeah.
15 just for 15 minutes into my lunch break, just to not have the stimuli,
Yeah.
just to have a moment. But those little pockets of, it doesn't take like in 60 seconds of intentional breathing, you change your nervous system. So
Yes.
it's that sympathetic fight or flight always turned on that adds to the etiology of burnout. So if you interrupt it throughout the day, and it doesn't take much, you don't
Yeah.
need money, you don't need to be anywhere. But if you interrupt it throughout the day, you're constantly getting yourself back to a resilient state, a reparative state. I love
Yeah.
what you did with the daycare and like
Yeah.
going in the bathroom stall. I get it. I used to have to close my door
Yeah.
so nobody would knock. Like,
Exactly.
do not knock. Do not bother me. Do not disturb.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And you brought up another good point around connection. And I think that this is kind of the global conversation in developed countries of we're all kind of stuck behind screens, right? We're not
Right.
having connection that
Yeah.
is really a face-to-face. People don't pick up the phone anymore. It's texting. The lack of connection is a pandemic, right? I think we
Yeah.
can safely say that. And so I think this conversation around reconnecting with real humans, not behind a screen, is so important and is something that really should be underscored because your community of women that were watching your guys' kids for you when the kids were little, that is gold. And I just, at least
Oh,
in
yeah.
my community of moms, I don't see things like that happening because everyone is so isolated in their own little
Yes.
worlds. And so I really love that that's a great idea, actually, and needs to
You,
be
you have
underscored.
5 people, like
Yeah.
4 weeks, you have 4 weeks of like,
Yes.
and the other thing is, and this is the obvious, but like I grew up in the Bronx and then we moved to Rye and my mom, like her and all the women, they'd be hanging out and all the kids would like
Yeah.
the kid,
Yes.
they were in community and the kids were playing with each other. There wasn't
Yeah.
this, like they had support, they could talk about it with each other. And they say, watch my kid, I'm going to the grocery store. Like it was a different, like they were raised by everybody in the community. They weren't
Yeah.
just raised by their mom.
Yeah.
So, it's the whole thing has shifted. And the question is, how do we begin to
How
create
we
community around raising kids? And when it's been siloed, that,
Yeah.
it's not like that anymore.
And then there's the generation of women who their kids are older or off to
Yeah.
school and they are in full-blown menopause and there is
Yes.
a lot coming up for them there. So if you could maybe just shift us
Yeah.
to that demographic and
It's
describe
cool.
what do you see? What do you notice that are, again, patterns with those women? And do you approach them differently?
Yeah. I do.
Yeah.
They're all of a sudden, those who were all 100% of their circuits went into child rearing and travel sports and getting them into college, and it's all done. Um, they have a crisis of identity, huge crisis, identity crisis, and they don't know where to put all their energy. So it's that particular group, and I think across the board in menopause, it's a meaning making inflection point. So, from a physiological perspective, it's a metabolic inflection point, menopause, with what happens with all the hormones and metabolically speaking, but it's a meaning making inflection point where it dawns on them, they're on the back nine, and time is of the essence, and it's super limited now. They don't know how long they're going to be healthy or do these things. What do you want to do with the energy? Now you've got energy, you've got time, but you've lost touch if you weren't working. And sometimes if you were working, you're ready to stop. It's called menopause for a reason. The pause button needs to be pressed. I got a finite amount of time. Who am I? That's the big question. Who am I? I'm going to stop pleasing everybody. What's my authentic self? What do I want to do with this limited time? Who do I want to hang out with? How do I want to contribute? Everybody that I talk to is looking to leave a legacy, whether it's I want grandchildren, I want to create a new dynamic in my family, I want to put the love into them, or I want to do a project that's a legacy project. They don't necessarily want to sit there and crunch numbers, and it's not about making money anymore. It's about making meaning with people you love to hang out with and being around your girlfriends and taking cool trips. It's not about the money in the bank account because you realize TikTok. So it's a totally different thing. And you can see it clearly because no one's in the house. Like they're moving out. Like parents may be aging, but that's a heads up too. Like the body ages. People are like, I will age and I will transcend my body at some point. So who am I? What do I want to do? What's the meaning making? And more importantly, who do I want to do it with?
Yeah.
Who do I want in my life? It's huge.
Yeah.
Huge time. Fun. I think I'm 62. This is the best time of my life. I'm having more fun than I ever did in my 30s, 40s, and 50s with my girlfriends from high school, with my girlfriends from college. And our kids are all like up, they're still a little bit in because of the times. They can't totally make it on their own, but they're more out than in. It's the best. It's so fun reconnecting with people that way and just laughing and having fun.
Well, that's encouraging because I'm about 20 years behind you, and I'm like, okay, let's look ahead, and that's beautiful. And you've given such a great example of how to do that simultaneously with being, a mom and career. So I love that you said that. With the women who are now empty nesters, and again, kind of, I'm going to use the word, purpose driven. They're looking for kind of what is my purpose more than just like financial reward if they have that, again, luxury. Where do you see relationships change with their spouses, partners, and what role, again, going back to kind of the burnout, if we want to call it that still, where does that fit in terms of relationship dynamics?
I think that's a great question. So people that just hung in there because their kids were small and they didn't have the energy for a divorce, it's a big divorce moment for people that are like, this person doesn't work for me. And it's the women leaving, not the men. Yeah. In menopause, I have my menopausal women like, I'm done. I did this. I hung in there for my kids. This isn't the person I want to spend the next 30 years with. Like, they're the ones saying I'm out, which is really cool. And then the people who both them and their partner were just so busy with the kids, and all of a sudden the kids are gone and they're reconnecting. They're going out on date night. Like I've got like half of them are that. And they're like, I really like this person. Like, this is fun. We're starting to take cool vacations and we don't have to worry about babysitting and this, that, and the other. So I'm seeing it go both ways. And I'm seeing people cultivate beautiful second wave relationships with their spouses in menopause, because they're both thinking about the same things and supporting each other. They're actually coming together in this cool way where they're falling back in love. Because when it's almost like parallel play. It's when you're raising kids and taking, do your career. It's like you're together, but you're not. It's like you're playing on this parallel treadmill. And then it's like all of a sudden it starts coming back together for a lot of people, and it's a beautiful thing. They get tighter than ever before and take nicer vacations, and grandkids still, like my friends that are having grandkids, it brings the couple together. It's a whole new fun dynamic. Like I said, you're in the thick of it. Like my 40s and 50s, like I was in the thick of it. Yeah. But there's a beautiful second wave.
Hang in there.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I think that that's what I'm seeing too in my patients, is that there is this awakening of sorts.
Awakening. 100%. Great word. Yes.
Yeah. And it's happening within the relationship. And I definitely have had many patients who have said, hey, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And then I have others, like you said, that are coming back to their partners and really creating a second marriage, if you will, or a second
wave,
with second wave within the same person. It was interesting. Yesterday, I was actually listening to a podcast, James Sexton and Mel Robbins. They did a great podcast. And James Sexton is the divorce lawyer who's turned relationship expert. And in any case, he gave two pieces of advice, and I thought that they were sharing here. And the first was, in relationships at any stage, pay attention. He said, pay attention, because those little things that we can do for our partners along the way, even in the context of busy lives, they don't cost us a lot, right? A text message, a note, a hand on the shoulder, a hug at the end of the day. Those are really important. And I think it was a really good reminder that we can all, in our partnerships, identify that. And that alone can reduce stress hormones and cortisol. And you and I could get into the physiology around that. And then the second, he said, is, you really want to be able to look at your partner and say, like, you're my favorite person. And if you aren't able to do that after extensive work, right? Couples counseling or self-evaluation, whatever it is, then perhaps divorce is your happy ever after, right? And so I thought that was a really interesting perspective, especially for this group of women that I think are emerging into their new chapter. So
I love that. And I love that pay attention, because it's so meaningful. Like whatever sometimes, like I even know with my husband, he'll say, well, I'm bidding a job today. He's an engineer in construction. And one day I called him, I said, well, did you get the job? And he goes, do you know, me and the guys were talking, and very few wives actually call and say, did you get the job? He goes, you're in the plus column.
Yay!
Like just paying attention and asking a follow-up question sometimes is all it takes for them to feel loved and heard and seen. People want to feel heard and seen. And it doesn't you any money. You don't even have to skip just ask a follow-up question. They say they're playing a golf match against somebody who's really ill. How'd you do? What did you score? It's that kind of paying attention can make or break these little things sometimes,
Yeah. Without expectation of reciprocation sometimes. At least I personally have to work on that. I'm like, okay, now I asked the question. Am I going to get asked back? And it really...
I love it. Right. I love it. You're training them. They're watching the way you do it. You figure they got to catch on to the best. Yeah, that's great. I love it. I love it. That's hysterical. That's hysterical.
I think it's so true. Well, I want to get into hormones a little bit more.
Sure, let's do it.
So many women, they know, again, that their bodies are changing and shifting. Yeah. And we've talked about kind of the emotional and environmental, if you will, in terms of the stress environment. But really, what is happening hormonally in that perimenopausal era? And again, what can we do about it? This podcast isn't about hormone replacement per se, but you are an expert in that area. And so I really want to just kind of pick your brain. Could you just describe in terms of normal kind of premenopausal menstruation, and then what happens in the perimenopausal period, and why does that change this experience of burnout?
Yeah, so I'm going to make this super simple. So in your fertility years, you make estrogen. It's the star of the show, first half of the cycle. It reaches a certain level and it triggers the pituitary to send a text message to the ovary to ovulate. And then you make progesterone. It's the star of the show, second half of the cycle. And this is important to differentiate. Estrogen makes things grow. Progesterone kind of stabilizes the lining, but it relaxes you. It goes into GABA receptors where Xanax would go. Makes you feel calm, makes you feel relaxed, gives you a buffer. So when all things are working on all cylinders, those hormones are balancing each other out. So you feel balanced and stable when they're stable.
Mm-hmm.
If you're under long-term chronic stress, the way the hormonal milieu will go is the precursors go to making cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, which are essential for life, in lieu of testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. So estrogen goes like this, but progesterone will start to tank. People don't ovulate well, hence you don't make enough progesterone if you don't ovulate. So we lose the buffer. We lose our natural relaxation hormone. So we go from 0 to 10, we start feeling moody, we start bleeding heavy because the lining is it. We start feeling more PMS, more anger. Like if you've got more estrogen relationship to progesterone, you feel angry, you're coming in hot. Mm-hmm. So you've got those dynamics happening, when stress goes on a long time. And definitely, even if there's no stress, that goes on in perimenopause, up and down estrogen, progesterone first hormone down. And then if you've got ongoing stress, that amplifies the pre-existing things that happen in perimenopause. So people feel like the Wild West. They don't even know who they are. They feel disembodied. Like people say, I don't even recognize myself. I'm screaming at people. I'm not like this. I don't know who I am. I hear that consistently. And there's many things we can do, from adding in progesterone to working on lifestyle to adrenal support. But, Vitex is a great early perimenopausal herb. So there's many things we can do. And then in menopause, all hormones go down to 0. And the other thing that happens that's really important is that as estrogen drops to 0, insulin resistance goes up, inflammation goes up, and weight shifts from sub-Q to visceral. I don't care who you are. So that happens even if you're doing everything right. So people that are normally have it under control and dialed in, start gaining weight in the middle, and maybe it's 7 pounds, maybe it's 10 pounds. And about 5 to 7 is a compensatory mechanism, because we aromatize an estrogen. We make estrogen from fat cells. So the body wants to make its own estrogen to protect heart, brain, and bones. But the consequence is it's got to hold on to a little weight in menopause to do that. And it holds on to it primarily in the belly, and people with a genetic susceptibility for holding weight there, or just, diabetes, or they had gestational diabetes, they're going to do it even more. So you've got this metabolic inflection point in menopause. You've got this wild ride that lends itself to anxiety, panic attacks, depression, like severe mood swings. And stress is just going to amplify the whole game. Make that all worse. Ongoing stress is going to just add to the etiology. And there's a cool paper out by Picard. Have you read his work?
I have. I love him.
I love his work. And so what he talks about is this allostatic load. We've been talking about stress that goes on a long time. It creates mitochondria allostatic load, is what he's calling it, the MAL. And that mitochondria allostatic load will injure the mitochondria, and you feel it in every system. And the cardiovascular system is going to go off the rails. The autonomic nervous system is going to go off the rails. And again, depending on your genetic weak link, mitochondria is responsible for muscle function, for heart, for brain. It increases those M1 cells, the immune cells of the brain that are responsible, the microglia of the brain, the M1, the inflammatory ones that are responsible for putting down the tau proteins or Alzheimer's. So if you've got all this stress, you're going to have more Alzheimer's disease. Cardiovascular disease, number one killer in women. Now you've got dysregulation of the glycocalyx inside the arteries because of this ongoing stress. So stress isn't just this ethereal thing with burnout. There's real consequences to the mitochondria. Big studies at Columbia with Picard. So stress is inflammatory, majorly inflammatory to the mitochondria. So I think we've got the hormonal changes, and it's all connected, and the ongoing stress that happen at these inflection points. And it's like, well, how do we reverse engineer it? Both by changing what people are doing, not changing what they're doing, but changing how they're doing what they're doing in their lives.
Yes.
Doing it in a different pace, in a different way. And how do we put in the right supplements? How do we have the meaningful conversation about hormone replacement therapy? And I am a fan, but you still have to do lifestyle. with it and targeted supplements. So I think there's so many wonderful options on the table, and it's going to practitioners like yourself that know how to navigate this and know how to personalize it for the person sitting in front of you based on their genetics and their particular symptoms and their biases about hormone replacement therapy or not, how they want to blend all these things that we have at our fingertips right now to reorganize their life. It's a great reorganizer.
You just said so many amazing key things, and I'm going to try to just break them down a little bit. So you talked about the importance of how the redistribution of fat tissue from subcutaneous. So again, for our audience, subcutaneous is kind of what we see on a bathing suit, right?
Yeah.
There's more fat versus visceral fat is what's around our organs. So there's this redistribution. And while that might sound more aesthetically beneficial, unfortunately, it's not. It's actually, it can not only be evident on what you see visually, but it also can be worse for health outcomes. So that's one really important thing. And you illustrated the connection between estrogen declining and insulin resistance rising. And that's
way up.
Way up and well established as a direct cause and effect in many ways. And then the associations with estrogen in the brain and how that can then influence this, what's called M1 phenotype of macrophages becoming more inflammatory, microglia, and that being then problematic for neurodegenerative conditions such as Alzheimer's disease. But then there's this driver of dysfunction within the mitochondria, which are our energy producing organelles within our cells that then can be dysfunctional and not making enough ATP, this energy currency, and then that can lead to further cascading this degenerative process amongst not just the brain, but in other places in the body, leading to, again, more and more weight gain and potentially metabolic disruption. You said something that I want to just ask and maybe put you on the spot a little bit. Are you using any SNP panels when you are evaluating these patients to identify whether or not you need to intervene either earlier or differently? Are you using genomics when you're not seeing the responses that you would normally expect? When are you using genomics? And if so, what are you doing?
Well, I'm always using the detox genomics, right? Meaning I'm looking at COMT, the genetics of estrogen metabolism, COMT, MTHFR, 1B1, 1A1, glutathione S transferase, just to see how people are biotransforming estrogen. Then on Quest, I'm ordering the ApoE4s. So I have a really good sense of what's happening. Are they set up for hyperlipidemia and Alzheimer's disease by genetics? So I go really now, and sometimes I'll use 3x4 genetics and I'll get the whole thing. So I know what their big lean is in particular areas. But again, it comes down to economics. But those are the ones I'm consistently doing. The detox genomics and the ApoE4 right done on Quest. Nice, simple, easy, gives me a heads up. And then you look at their family history. And what's currently happening on their labs, like, what's happening with myeloperoxidase, what's happening with Lp(a), ApoB, lipid fractionation, fibrinogen, and I'll check clotting factors like hypercoagulability panel on Quest to see, are they at risk even if I put estrogen in for blood clots? Like, what's their blood clot risk here?
Factor V Leiden is an example.
And that's on that panel. Really great panel right through Quest. Yeah.
And you already said this. Yeah, it is. I do use Factor V Leiden through standard labs, LabCorp Quest. I do the same thing. I think that it's so important, and you already said it, and that heart disease is the number one killer of women by far. It's
by far.
1 in 3 women will die of cardiovascular disease. So that is so important to just highlight, that people, not to take away anything for the importance of prevention of things like breast cancer and early detection, as well as to emphasize, cancer prevention. All those things are very important. However, by far, cardiovascular disease is the leading cause. And when we think about estrogen playing a role in that, and the benefits that potentially, again, there's a lot of kind of things that we like to look at, but estrogen largely is protective. And so I think
So yes.
so protective. And this
So
is a
protective.
conversation. Yeah. So if you could just speak to maybe, because you have been in practice during this big transition from kind of anti-estrogen because of all these misplaced fears to now this moment that I think we're entering, fortunately, and finally, of estrogen kind of being able to emerge again. Can you just talk about maybe some of
Sure.
that data and why we're now realizing, ooh, oopsie.
Yeah, so I was in women's health when this is what we did. People went in menopause and we put them on hormone replacement therapy. There was no discussion because we knew what it did for heart, brain, and bones. So it's an antioxidant inside the heart, inside the vessels. So it's huge for the glycocalyx, estrogen is, and we know it takes a nosedive. So then 2002, 70% of women came off hormone replacement overnight because of that crazy press release from the Women's Health Initiative that wasn't even accurate. So, what we know to be true, and some of the data is still evolving, is that if you get in estrogen, especially the better estrogens that we're using now, we're using 17 beta estradiol, and in the day we use pregnant mare's urine, right? And they pulled the study because of an increased risk in breast cancer when it was 1 more in 1,000, and it was not in the estrogen alone group, it was in the estrogen and synthetic progestin. That's why they pulled it. That was the reason. So you fast forward, if you get in estrogen early on, it works like an antioxidant in the heart. If you wait, this is the timing hypothesis, beyond 10 years, and what we're all trying to figure out in functional medicine, and me and Joel have our own way of looking at this, what they're saying is after 10 years, in susceptible people with plaque, if you throw estrogen back in, it could release plaque into the arteries and cause a cardiac event after the 10 years. So it's a hypothesis. They have to go back and really look at all this and do some new studies. But you want to kind of consider, now that women are coming back on, the benefits are, the most benefit you're going to get is in the first 5 years. And if you keep it in, you're fine. But that's kind of, I think, a critical window now. If you've got the option where you've got women that are just going in, try to get it in within the first 5 years, because you're going to get all the benefits for heart, brain, and bone. You're not going to miss your moment, you know. And then if it's somebody who's been out for a long period of time but wants to go on, they want muscle protein synthesis, they want bone health and all those things. Well, then you just got to look at their cardiac IQ, you look at their calcium score, you look at a clearly to see if they're at increased risk for soft plaque or plaque, where you could potentially cause a problem if you put it. I'm putting potential because you know the data is like, you know, they got to relook at this. But if you want to err on the side of caution, someone 10 years out, just, you know, order these cardiac IQs, look at the myeloperoxidase, look at the LP PLA2 on there, and look at a calcium score and potentially a clearly, and see, you know, what's going on with the plaque before you throw it in.
Yeah, and I think that something you and I have discussed offline is just the misunderstanding around the difference between cardiac clotting risk between transdermal estrogen and oral estrogen. Do you want to just kind of highlight that?
Yeah. So the clotting risk is much lower than we used to think. And it's, the black box warning has been taken off of vaginal estrogen, not even the same animal. You can do that. Doesn't increase clotting risk. When you take estrogen orally, first pass of the liver, it increases clotting factors. So if you've got a factor V Leiden or a genetic problem with clotting, you're going to be ticking that up, taking it orally. Transdermal does not do the same thing. It avoids the first pass of the liver. So it's negligible. I mean, I wouldn't say it was zero. I can't prove that, nor can anybody, but it's not the same thing. So the way I manage it is just do the hypercoagulability panel through Quest. They've got no clotting genes. I put them on the transdermal, you know, so, and you can do transdermal patches or transdermal Divigel, or, you know, there's many ways. I'm a transdermal fan. And if somebody doubles down on, well, I heard that oral is better for cholesterol, I haven't seen that in my clinical practice. People that wanted to do it because they heard somewhere that it's better improvement, it hasn't played out in my clinical setting, but I know there are studies to show that it might be a little bit better
Yeah.
for cholesterol, but I haven't really seen it when
Yeah.
I've given people the trials, and most of them have gone back to the transdermal because it was easier and they felt better.
Yeah. And I bluntly will respectfully challenge my patients who really feel attached to their oral estrogens and say for hormone replacement therapy, and unless there is a very good reason we can't go an alternative route such as creams, gels, and
Yeah,
the patches are causing an issue, let's try a different brand. And if that still doesn't work, I just the oral estrogen direction, there's not a lot of good reasons to keep someone on oral estrogen in this day and age with all the other
correct.
options we have given the safety profile. But I agree with you, is the hypercoagulability panels are really helpful to
Yeah,
identify those who may be higher risk, and then making sure that you're not going to propagate their risk through. You mentioned Clearly, which is a what's called a CT angiogram. It's an overlay of a CT angiogram, which is looking at not only hard plaque, which a coronary calcium score is looking at just calcified plaque, which is very useful and much less expensive, but a CT angiogram is looking at both soft plaque and hard plaque. Monique, can you just speak to you going back to the genomics for a moment? You named a bunch of genes that I know I'm intimately familiar with, but I don't think our audience is. You mentioned something called the CYP1B1 gene, and then
yeah,
also the COMT gene. And so
sure.
there's quite a bit of inference, maybe not definitive data, but inference around those who have variants in those genes that may respond better or worse to estrogen metabolism. And what we want to do if somebody is a fast metabolizer, let's say, of that CYP1B1 or a slow metabolizer, what differences do you approach in maybe some of the supplement products you may add in those women?
Sure. So 1B1, it means they're genetically set up, but it doesn't mean it's actually happening. But we can track what they're doing.
Yeah.
It means that they're going to primarily put a hydroxyl group, it's a little OH group, on the fourth carbon of estrogen, right? So estrogen's a long carbon chain. You're putting it on the fourth carbon. Why is that a problem? Because that's been associated with DNA damage and dangerous quinones, hence increased risk of breast cancer and estrogen-dependent cancers. And it's modifiable. You can change where you put the hydroxyl group. You can move it to the 2, which is less carcinogenic, less inflammatory, especially if it's methylated and moved out. So, I like NAC, resveratrol, sulforaphane. Those are kind of some of my favorites, and they'll move the dial on that 1B1. It's modifiable. Again, people have it. You can do a Dutch test or a Genova test. You can see,
Yes.
are they expressing it? And then you can change it and track them. So it's not just like something that's out there that you have no ability to follow. Like, you've got it. You are converting to more of the 4. Let me put these supplements in and repeat this in 6 months. Have I changed your 4 hydroxy in your urine? And urine estrogen metabolism can only be done with urine. You can't do it at Quest. So it's got to be looking at the Dutch or Genova or some urine test that's doing urine estrogen. So the beauty is you can track and tweak, and what's happening. You know what their genetic propensity is, which is really cool. And COMT, so methylation, people talk about methylation all over the place. So I'll just, like I always say, like, you eat folic acid or you take it in a supplement, your body's got to convert it to its active methyl form for like 4 big things. We donate these methyl groups to carbons in the body for DNA repair, protein synthesis, neurotransmitter production, and detoxification of estrogens. We stick a methyl group on to make it more water soluble so we can take it out in stool and urine. So methyl groups are really important for 4 big things. And so if you've got this MTHFR, that means that you're a little bit sluggish in your conversion of folic acid from foods and in supplements. Not that you're not doing it at all, but you can have up to 60% decrease in your ability to convert it to its active form, to donate these methyl groups, to transfer, if we just look at it through estrogen, to biotransform estrogen, right? And so So there's MTHFR, but MTHFR has to stick itself to estrogen with an enzyme. That's
Yeah.
COMT. So if you've got an MTHFR and then you don't have the enzyme that's working, you've got double trouble. You've got two weak links where you're not going to clear estrogen and it's going to build up in the body, hence breast tenderness, fibrocystic breasts, fibroids, like you're recirculating your estrogens, you're not clearing them. Easy enough. If you know people are doing it, there's supplements like, with trimethylglycine and things in it that will make that COMT work better and the MTHFR. So they're easy interventions with do I say product names or just like methylated supplements, which, with Methyl Complete from Nutridyne or Methyl Care from, Metagenics or, what's Thorne's name? There's a bunch of companies that have different. Methyl Guard, where they're taking this into consideration and they're putting in the trimethylglycine, methylated folate, methylated B12, and then you can track people like, am I actually doing what it said it would? The beauty is you can track. You're not just guessing.
And that's what I really want our audience to hear is that these are modifiable, right? And there are 100%. Things that shift and change. And I think your point around the genomics may give us those predispositions or vulnerabilities is another term, but really understanding what is happening in real time, we're not going to get that from genomics. We're going to get that through further assessment. And I think you and I would agree that the what's the word I'm looking for? Roadblock for this being more widely available is economics, right?
Yes.
Some of this testing is not accessible outside of functional medicine specialty labs, which can be very expensive. And often, and this is my bias, I don't think a lot of practitioners know how to use that in synergy.
I think so.
And so some people are getting these fancy tests and then the practitioner is not quite versed in how to use them. And then they're not being given a lot of value. And so then there's this like, well, I did all this testing, and it's not until they see someone like you or I or someone who's done a lot of training that they're really understanding what all this data means. And unfortunately, there's just kind of a slower uptick in terms of people learning how to interpret all this. So point is, doing your due diligence of at least initially understanding what are your genetic predispositions or vulnerabilities. I think you and I are both big fans of that. 2 is looking at what's happening boots on the ground right now with whatever interventions or lack of any interventions that you're doing. And then 3 is really most importantly, how are you feeling, right? And how do we modify that? And what products, if any, nutritional supplements, foods, what can we do to help things work better is of course so critical. So
and I love what you said. And the other thing is now with the direct to consumer or even, listen, I'm director of functional medicine coaching. So I love coaches, but even with coaches being able to order something, I can't tell you how many times people have come in with the test and they're looking at the Dutch and they're focusing on the top part of the Dutch, which is just estrogen, progesterone balance. And their estrogen metabolism has been missed for years and they have a ton of 4, which is really putting them at risk. Like the big ticket item was missed. So I encourage you to go to someone that really knows how to interpret this because it's easily changed if you know what you're doing.
Exactly. It's definitely something I think you and I could probably talk more about, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. I want to kind of just wrap up in our last little bit here. It's been so fun. I want to just rapid fire at you a little bit in terms of you have lectured a lot in the last few years on GLP-1s. And so I want to get a soundbite from you. You just talked about this a little bit at the recent IFM annual conference, but there's a lot of use in the non-diabetic and maybe not even in the obese population, those who identify in the BMI category as overweight. GLP-1s, I don't know what the recent statistics are, but a massive amount of Americans are currently using GLP-1s. Could you tie that into this kind of burnout, hormonal, perimenopause conversation and how you're not only using that in practice, but what you think women need to know about these drugs and how to use them without exacerbating burnout?
It's a great question. Listen, they should win the Nobel Prize done right. I've never seen a drug capable of such far-reaching thing done right. Does everybody need them? Absolutely not. And the game is use them as a bridge. They are not a permanent player for most people unless you're a diabetic or have really the metabolic curve is down. But in menopause, where it's so devastating and you can't move the dial on weight and it's coming on with you doing everything right, the tiniest bit
Mhm.
will help you normalize the weight. So it does three big things that are really important to know. It lowers global inflammation. So inflammation's going up as we age, inflammation's going up with ongoing stress, inflammation's going up with perimenopause and menopause. So it turns down global inflammation. So it's helping just from, I'm talking about perimenopause and menopause, but now like elite athletes are using small amounts so that they recover from extreme workouts faster and they recover from injuries faster. So it's being used for many different off-label things. And it's all about the dose. The dose makes the poison. So in a small amount, it lowers inflammation, it increases lipolysis, especially in that visceral, the belly area in the organs that's associated with hot fat, inflammatory fat. Every single complex chronic disease gets turned on. So it's changing that. It changes that M1, M2 story. It moves the
Yep.
macrophages in the brain to the M2. That's why it's helping with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So people are using it for joint pain, plantar fasciitis, risk for dementia, but these are small doses. Like it goes up to 15 milligrams. We're talking 1 milligram
Yeah.
can move the dial with many of these things. Or listen, sometimes you need to put people on 2.5. Sometimes you need to go up to 3 to 5 and then bring them down. But very few people, unless they're diabetics or the can has been kicked way down the line, they don't need the 7.5, the 10, the 12.5, the 15, unless they had real metabolic stuff. The kind of little aging stuff that's keeping us all stuck, small doses will normalize it. And then it's easy to keep it in check. And it's about the personalization. Some people may only need 1 milligram once a month or twice a month to maintain a good status. So
Mhm.
people can be really creative with it on these small doses and lifestyle. If you're doing the small
Mhm.
doses,
Yeah.
you're engaging in lifestyle. And it can be such a win to get people unstuck in perimenopause, menopause, and with aging, with all these things that ail us. But I'm seeing it, and now especially retatrutide. It's
Yeah.
not approved yet, but
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of my patients who are elite athlete CrossFit people doing extreme stuff. They're on small doses that they're calling it on the street
Retta.
Retta, right? It's a peptide, and they're taking small doses, and they're like recovering really fast from workouts. It's decreasing post-workout inflammation. They're not losing a ton of weight, but it's making them a little bit more cut, and they feel good because they don't have the
Yeah.
inflammation from all the workout. So I think we're beginning to see all these off-label things. And so as long as somebody's keeping an eye on you, tracking the metrics, you're really personalizing it to what you need to do. Like I take people on and off these things most of the time. Right? There
Yeah.
are those people that if they go off, their blood sugar just goes wild. And the consequence
Yeah.
of that is so much bigger than me keeping them on
Yeah.
a low dose, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a great moment in time if you go to a practitioner that knows how to navigate it, track your labs and track your symptoms to finding your personal dose. It's an option. Does everybody need it? Absolutely not. But
Right.
I'm finding it magic in that menopausal time where people are really stuck with the weight and stuck. They can't get it
Yeah.
off. It's coming on and they're doing everything right. It's
Yeah.
not that they're not doing their lifestyle. So
Yeah.
it shines
And
there.
you mentioned 1 milligram, and just for people, typically when we think about tirzepatide going up to 15 milligrams, typically a starting dose for obesity or diabetes is 2.5 milligrams. So
Right.
just for context, we're talking about less than half of a starting
100%.
dose. And being able to maintain that, and even sometimes starting lower and dosing less frequently
Right.
than what is thought of as maybe once a week, going down to, Monique, you mentioned twice a month, even potentially as a maintenance dose. So So great. And then do you see that in women, again, in that perimenopausal period, that this can exacerbate some of those symptoms of emotional disturbance, mental health challenges, anxiety? Is that something you've observed at all? Okay.
Once, I had it once. And the reason it happened is because the food noise got I told her to start with 1 milligram, which is fine. And she did the whole bottle. She did 2.5. And she had lowish blood sugar to begin with. She was having rebound. So she had a low blood sugar attack that then she went into an anxiety and panic attack for a couple of days. But I'm actually seeing that it improves it because it lowers global inflammation in the brain.
Yeah.
Like, are there these one-off, every once in a while, so rare, someone will have a paradoxical response. And this is a weird pattern. I had 2 people in the hundreds, and they were happy people to begin with, happy, outgoing, and a small amount made them a little bit quieter and inward, and they didn't like it. They weren't depressed, but it was odd for them. It was weird. But they were people that had no issues with, like, they were out there, they were happy, they were like, and they were doing it for weight loss. So, that was the only thing. But I'm not seeing those things. If you go slow and you really have people find their dose. And like I said, do I go up to 2.5 and 5? Whatever the person needs, if there's no side effects and they're not losing weight, you raise a little, you find the dose. But most people can get away with very small doses. And slow and steady wins the race with lifestyle, like
I
game
agree.
changing.
And you're not seeing, at least I don't believe you're seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, any sort of sarcopenia because you're tracking that closely.
I'm using a BIA. I'm tracking it. And they're small amounts, and we're ramping up, like we're educating them. So it's turning down the food noise. They're seeing results. So it's like this feed forward cycle. Then they're working out more because they're seeing results, and their inflammation's better and they're feeling better. It's like they got momentum, like the Knicks winning last night. It's like they got more momentum. It's momentum. They get this positive momentum and they feel good. It gets them going.
I agree. I think my 2 cents would be that sometimes because of its effect on cardiac myocytes, I see an increase in the resting heart rate a little bit, and that baseline can sometimes present for some individuals as almost like an unexpected nervousness or jitters. But once they realize, hey, this is actually just the medicine, my system getting used to the medicine, it usually kind of normalizes and regulates. And that is probably my only little editorial that I would add to that. But I agree. I think that this can be a game changer. And I said on a interview with Dan Lukeser for IFM a few years ago, I really don't see major downsides with this drug when done at microdoses and done with the right population. I know there are, as we both do, someone with a history of pancreatitis, for example, you have to watch closer, and you have to be really thoughtful of people who have already maybe disordered eating behaviors that they are using this. But, there's even some evidence to show that it actually can calm down some of those behavioral patterns, especially in those who have struggled with that their whole lives. Alcoholism, it's even been beneficial for curbing alcohol cravings. So I agree.
It's huge. It's huge for addiction. Huge for addiction. Yeah, and again, it's amazing what it has the far-reaching potential to do to get people unstuck. Yeah, and and watch the low blood sugar. And so the game always is you want to dial down the food noise. You want people eating. You don't want them not eating. That's the miss, is when people think I should not eat, and that's the way I lose weight. And then their muscle gets wasted, and you have all these metabolic adaptations. Then you can never get off the drug. Yeah. So it's the eat. People lose weight eating healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to ask you for a quick response for these next questions.
Sure.
What is the most overrated biohack that you're seeing right now? Overrated.
Oh my God, that's a really, really great question. God, overrated. Let me come back to that.
Okay.
I can pass. I can't think of what I think is overrated because I don't use a whole lot of biohacks. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite wearable.
Give me a favorite wearable. Or a ring or Whoop. I think they're great because they give you so much different, so many different metrics. You can put your blood sugar on there and you can look at different patterns.
I got my
oh my
Apple
God.
Watch, my Whoop. I got this. I don't have
you
my
got
CGM.
It. There you go. There you go.
Favorite supplement for stressed women?
Ashwagandha. Love it.
Ashwagandha.
Love it.
Dosing?
It helps with thyroid dosing. I usually can start sometimes 200 twice a day. I can go a little bit high and watch it just to normalize things, but I love it. Helps with thyroid, helps with mood, helps with perimenopause and menopausal stuff.
Great. One thing every burned out woman should stop doing today.
Saying yes when they mean no.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I started to do, like when I realized I started to, anytime someone would ask me to do something, I'd say, oh, that sounds really fun. Can I get back to you tomorrow? Give yourself a hesitation moment before the yes. Unless it's a yes from deep inside, give yourself the moment to look at your calendar. Can I really pull this off? Or else you end up in a loop where you're canceling and then you feel guilty and then people are mad at you. Or you go and you don't want to go. So don't say yes when you mean no, and it's okay to say, can I get back to you tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, I'm honored that you said yes to this. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, of course. This is fun.
One thing every burned out woman should start doing tomorrow.
I think the micro breath, and I'm saying two things here, but I think if you just start with, having a moment to yourself, and whether that's what you talked about in the parking lot, but you need to stand still for a moment and check in. Am I breathing? And just ask yourself the question, what do I need? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need a glass of water? We're out of touch with our own intuition about when we're burnt out, what our body actually needs to heal. So take the 5 or 10 minutes and just, contemplate, which is different than meditate. Contemplate is what do I need? What does my body need? What do I need to do for myself? And you'll emerge an answer if you give yourself those little pockets and move from there. Do you need to walk? Do you need to rest? Do you need more sleep? Do you need more water?
Yeah. Beautiful. I need
small changes. Small changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Atomic habits, little habits.
Yeah. Little tiny changes.
Most underrated biomarker or underutilized biomarker, and I'm going to add a little asterisk there, that is widely available for you. What would be the most underutilized or unknown? Yeah.
If I could say two, I think people aren't paying attention to ferritin, and it's such an easy biomarker and it's not expensive. And when ferritin is low, people start losing their hair. They start feeling incredibly fatigued. And you don't know, because you could have a normal CBC. You're not anemic by regular bloods. But if you're not looking at ferritin, the mitochondria can't function. It doesn't have the same vitality or capacity. And I see women start losing their hair with ferritins less than 40. So when I talk to hair specialists, they're like, you want 75 to 100. So I can't tell you how many people I've checked, and it's been 22, 14. And I replace it, and they're lights, energy, hair's coming back, cognition back online. So I think that's a good one. And I think metabolically, paying attention to triglycerides, the rise in trigs tells you a lot about how you're doing metabolically speaking.
Yeah. Oh, and so widely available, cheap. Anyone can access both of those. Great. I love that you said that. I have in my head some fancier ones, but those are two brilliant. So I love that you said that. So that's great. Closing question. Many of our listeners are women who have built successful careers like yourself, raised families, optimized their nutrition, taking supplements, worn the wearables. They're still exhausted. What are they missing?
Space. Carving, and alone time. Space away from everybody to reorganize themselves and to do deep work. And from deep work, you make decisions that are from clarity and they're in alignment with who you are and your deeply held values and beliefs. To do that deep work, you need to carve out some time
Yeah.
to be by yourself. And whether that's, a couple hours on a weekend, you just get in the car and go away you got to be away from everybody. But I think that deep work is so essential. It's downtime. We don't give ourselves that. Downtime is a waste of time to busy success. That's what I used to think.
Yeah.
Downtime is a waste of time.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, downtime is the time where I figure out next moves from a place of deep knowing and integration instead of frantic decision making.
Gosh, that's such good advice. Such good advice, because I fall into that category often of like, I have to be productive. I have to be productive.
Yeah.
What do I need to do next that falls into a productive category? And space, as you eloquently put it, is such a good reminder of like, that's actually when we can recharge and become even more productive on the other side of it. And it's just not enough women are given that reminder. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautifully
Yeah.
said.
I mean, I would say that I used to be addicted to busyness. And in some ways that's my lean.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
even if I don't need to do something, I make myself do something so I don't feel like I'm a loser, right? It's a crazy psychology.
Yeah.
And I see it in myself. I'm like, there I go again. No, it's okay to go in the woods for a couple hours and just walk without talking to anybody and do nothing. Like, that's the medicine. That's actually where I make better decisions about my next moves.
Well, you're such a leader and an inspiration to so many.
You too.
I'm just so grateful. I always felt connected to you. It's the Italian sister vibe. So
absolutely.
It's so fun. And thank you for being here. This has been another episode of the Vida Vitality Podcast with Monique Class. We look forward to hearing your comments, and please hit subscribe.